Greetings, survivor! It is time for some more base building, and specifically bases that will withstand hordes, and of course that includes the Blood Moon hordes. Just like teenagers, we're going to be climbing trees and making tree houses today. Well, somewhat more like a Wookiee tree platform to begin with, but at least it's the basics of making a full tree house, which is pretty much the same base. While the game doesn't specifically have any blocks or any crafting for making tree houses, there are some blocks you can use that look pretty good and fits in just fine. So first of all, you need to decide on the look. The most lightweight alternative to use for building a treehouse is to utilize the wooden catwalks, and I have some of them here. With a mass of 4, they are held up pretty well with the trees, and they are probably one of the lightest alternatives you can find. Another one you can use is the wooden plate. It has a mass of 5, so it's just slightly heavier, so it's almost as good, but it does have the added benefit of being a solid, non-see-through block that you can paint. And camo painting looks pretty good along with maybe green colored textures, grass, or maybe white if you're building in a snow biome. You can also use the catwalks with the railings. And let's see, catwalks here. So you have the catwalks with the railings in the corner, etc. And those work pretty well as well. You can then use wooden stairs for the vertical component. And of course, wooden hatches, wooden doors fit in pretty well. Just sadly, they can't be painted, so they will stand out a little bit. So why do we use trees and not just poles or pillars? It's a great question. And it comes down to the peculiar phenomena that we used in a previous video. One of the base, or rather the wall, made of trees and chairs. In effect, zombies will not target trees pretty much for any reason, whereas other blocks they will if they run into them. And that's good, because a tree can be taken down really fast by zombies if they really want to bash it. However, I suspect that the AI has been implemented in such a way as to not attack trees, and this probably to avoid them deforesting whole areas as they wander around aimlessly. Can you imagine having a wandering horde passing through a forest? If they would be wrecking any tree they walked into, it would be quite a mess, and it would be quite an empty area. We wouldn't be having a nice forest here. We'd be having a much more open space. So either way, this is a good thing for us because we can use this to our advantage. First, you need to get yourself up, and you can do that a few different ways. Let me jump down and try not to break my legs. Obviously, you could be using ladders, for instance, here. But a better way is probably just to, let's see if I can get a frame down here. To use frames to nerve pull yourself up, at least when you're building it. So why would you be using frames and not ladders? Well, a ladder will work and it looks better, but it has a bit of a problem. If you stick a ladder to a tree, you make the ladder a potential target for them to bash, and the tree might be taken down just as collateral damage. So you have to make sure when you construct the way up, and if you put ladders topped by a hatch in the tree, make sure that it's not one of the main trees, such that if the zombies do knock it down, you can just replant and rebuild it when it's full size without losing a whole base. So we're up here, and let's get over here as well. So as you can see, I've already done some building and some testing around. I've constructed some catwalks between the trees, and it's actually pretty easy. The way I normally do it is, I pick a tree, and you inch your way out just to the edge. You can basically just keep on stacking as long as you're not blocking it. And let me catch myself there so I don't break my leg. I'm going to do this a little bit in creative mode just to save some time. But you basically just keep building it out as you go along and extend it. And obviously, if you fall down, you could be breaking a leg. So having some hay bales might be helpful if you're doing a lot of building up here. So what if you can't find a good cluster of trees? And obviously there's a lot of trees around here, but they're spaced a fair bit. Not to worry. As I'm sure you know from watching my tree farming video, you can just plant them yourself. Let them grow up and then start building. I mean, if you space them out appropriately, maybe 5 to 10, a couple of days later, 2-3 days later, they'll grow up and they'll be the adult size tree, and then you can start doing the building. While any tree works, using the pine trees, because they're tall and straight, are an obvious choice. So using catwalks, you can actually build a fair bit out from the tree before it starts collapsing. how far really depends on your design and how many catwalks you have hanging off each tree. So if you build too far, it will come crashing down. So depending on what you've built, everything can come crashing down. So take note of that. So how far can you build? Well, let's see, we have 4 here, and of course we have some extras as well. And we get 5, 6, 7, 8, and I think we're about to start crashing down here. As you saw, everything off here just dropped down and collected into some wooden piles. And fortunately here, everything didn't crash down. If I do take out the trees and everything, you'll see a lot more destruction, and obviously we don't want that. So how do we know what the structural integrity of the tree is? I mean, we can't just pick up the tree and check the info on it just like we could on these blocks. I mean, this one you can see the load is 40 and that's a mass of 4. You can't do that easily on a tree. I mean, you could check this one, the actual tree in the creative, but if you're not able to do that in creative, it's a little bit tougher. So we're going to run a bit of an experiment. So I have here 2 different setups. One is just a 100 pillar, the wood pillar that I put down, and I've constructed some catwalks here. And here's a fully grown tree where I have constructed the exact same pattern. So I'm just going to build up a little bit here and see when it falls down. So I'm putting 2 in the corners here and 2 in the corners here. And we'll see which one comes crashing down first, because that would allow us to gauge a little bit of what the structural integrity would be on the tree, because we can see that on the poles. So let's see, 1, 2, 3 here. Let's do 1, 2, 3 here as well. So we can just keep building out here. And there it fell down. So that was the last one. So let's see if this one can hold it. Nope, everything falls down. And as you notice, it wasn't just one side that fell down. Everything fell down. So it dropped. And with both of them dropping, we should be able to estimate that the max load and everything is just the same as the pillar. Of course, you have access to the creative. You can just see that the load is actually the same on the whole tree as it is on the wood pillar, but it's an easy way to just check it. So what if you want to use some of these cool looking metal catwalks that you can upgrade the wooden catwalks into? Well, let's try. So I have a few here just to save us from upgrading. And let's see here, I built a few around the tree here as well. Now, problem with these ones is that they're a lot heavier than the wooden ones. So you can place basically around the tree like this, but as you start extending, well, that doesn't really work. And it's simply because they're just too heavy. So when you want to do this one, you really have to take care that you don't put a lot of weight beyond these catwalks, because it will come crashing down. But what if you still want to extend it? I mean, how can you do that? Well, there are some ways around it. So we will be turning to these wooden support beams. And I have some here. So what are these good for? Well, obviously they look like they would be able to provide a little bit of support. So if I put one here, I put one here, and I put them around the tree like this, what happens if I build out more? Well, you see suddenly you can actually hold a lot more. And well, it still fell down eventually, but you saw it still could hold more. And you can use that trick for when you are building with the wooden plates as well. You put in your catwalks, and as you think you're getting way too far out, you can just stack out support beams to help you build further. And it can give some extra structural integrity for your build to prevent it from collapsing. Obviously, it only gives you an extra 1 or 2 spaces, but again, that can be enough, because I mean, you don't want to have a base that is all the way out here. You want to make sure it's connected to a tree and maybe a catwalk to another tree, but not, you don't want to have a 20 by 20 around the tree, because that just looks really weird. So one question that comes up is that if you use these catwalks, or I can show you using one of the plates here as well. Well, actually, we had the plates here. How do you place anything on them? I mean, if I want to make let me get in the chest here. If I want to get in the chest and I want to place it down, it looks a little bit weird, right? Because it's floating on top here. Actually, let me get another one. So how do you make it nice and snug? Well, the obvious trick is to use the Catwalks. I'm going to change back to the normal one. You hold R, you get advanced placement. And then you basically just flip them upside down. When you flip them upside down, instead of having something floating in there, it looks nice and snug. From a structural integrity standpoint, it doesn't really matter because it still occupies the same block, but it looks a little bit better. So you can do that for catwalks around a tree just to make it look nicer. Of course, you might argue that it doesn't really look so nice of the wooden ones, and I sort of agree. The metal ones look better, but again, they have the structural integrity issue because they're so much heavier. Now, with all this information out, let's progress to building a real base, one that can withstand a horde. So I have the basics already done up here, just to save a little bit of time. So I planted down some trees just in a square. There's 5 blocks in between. And I started building up here, and I reinforced these one with iron as well because they can hold a little bit more. And I put catwalks in between. So I'm going to just build up here, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I have the wooden plates, and then I have some openings here, and we're going to put in a bit of windows here. And you don't necessarily have to do that, but it just looks a bit better. You could have just a solid block as well. Let's see if I can copy that rotation. And let's put them down. Just gives us a little bit of visibility outside of the wooden walls. And of course, the mobs can't really see through it, so that works pretty well. So let me finish up all the sides as well. What we're going to do for the middle, though, we're going to make it a little bit differently. We're going to have, and let's put in some of them here. We're going to have a bit of an opening here. We don't want to have a straight opening because zombies can see us through that one, and they could potentially also shoot us through. And we want to avoid doing that. So instead, we're going to go into advanced rotation. We're going to use the iron bars, and we're going to lay them down here. That gives us a nice platform to stand and shoot down at, and it helps us protect our base. Obviously, we could do something similar here, iron bars on the windows, but you know, it looks a little bit better with having windows. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you look down here, there are some gaps in between the tree and these blocks. And why does that matter? Well, if you're having cops around, it really does matter because the cops can see you, they'll aggro on you, and then they'll start vomiting. There are some potential ways that you can minimize that a little bit. And you could, for instance, start placing blocks around, but as you notice, it doesn't work very well if you're using the plates down here. If you're using the catwalks, upside down catwalks, you could potentially do that, but it is a bit of a problem. So what happens during the horde nights is that you want to stay a little bit away from the trees so you don't get cops spotting you in between them. So what about the ceiling? Well, we could be using just the wooden one again, but we're going to do something just slightly differently. Let me take this one out. So we're going to put down some poles, and let me get them into my inventory. Let's have some wooden poles. Let's place them down. So we're going to put some poles here just to help hold up the ceiling. And why do we do that? Well, if you hang everything off the walls, which are hanging off the flooring, things will start falling down eventually. So we want to sort of avoid doing that. So for instance, we could put just the normal ones like this. And if you see, right, this one is basically hanging off not necessarily the wall, but this pole block. And that gives us some way of preventing, for instance, vultures from spotting you. And you can place those in. Of course, the one here is a little bit easier. Right, and that looks pretty all right. And we can continue doing that all across as well, just to have a full cover from even flying vultures. So I'm going to finish off here a little bit, and then we'll get back to some of the horde testing. All right, I've now built up the base, and before we go any further, and I put in a door here as well, let's do a little bit of painting. So let's get into the paint here. And this is where, again, why having the plates makes it pretty nice, because you can really do quite a good job of making it blend into sort of the forest theme that we're having here. Now, we could be using the camo one, Or you could be using, for instance, the grass one from the bottom, again, just to help to make things blend in. And let's do a little bit of a paint roller here just to make it faster. And of course you can do this any color that you want to, and of course you can do whatever style you want to have it. But again, this is just some general ideas. And if you were in a winter biome and you're having white all around you, obviously making everything white would probably make a lot more sense as well. And that's done with the painting, and as you see, it looks pretty good. It blends in quite well with the whole forest theme, just with some camo texture. And of course, if you spend some more time at it, you'll probably be able to make it look a lot better. But let's call that a day for the painting, and let's do some testing then. So let me first get into debug mode, and let's start in by spawning in, let's say, 25 feral ones. Let's see here. Let's see, who should we be doing here? Let's do Darlene Ferals. Alright. So that's 25 of her. And they don't see her, that's why they're walking around, and then now they see me. And they all run over here. And because they don't really see me, being up here, they don't really see me through the iron bars. They don't really do very much. They congregate here because that's where they heard the sound, but that's about it. It makes it a pretty good place to stand up here just to shoot, and I keep shooting. As you notice, I'm undetected, so they don't see me, but obviously they can feel me. So that's pretty good. But what about a Blood Moon Horde? Well, let's get into the time settings here a little bit. And because I'm in debug mode, I can do that. So let's set us back to day 14. And let's bring us right up to right before the Blood Moon Horde. And that gives us a couple minutes. And you see we're here at the Blood Moon Horde, and it's just about to start. So now we should be hunted. Yep, the zombies should be rushing in here. And my game stage is about 460, so it's not extremely high. But we are getting some zombies coming in here. And just like the spawned in feral ones, they run up here. They don't really target the trees, even if I stand over here. They can hunt me. But the trees aren't really being targeted. If this was other blocks like the pillars, there was a lot more risk that they would start targeting them as they run to get to me. Get some light here. So you can just stand up here and just do your shooting and kill whatever you want to, and that will give you some experience. And again, it is a type of a stilt or pillar base, but because you're using the trees, it's just much more effective, and I think it looks better as well. So everything looks good, but nothing else is really happening. So what happens if you bring in some cops? So let me try and do that as well. Let's see if I can get in a feral cop. Oh. All right. I guess bringing in 50 of them wasn't quite what I was intending to do. And I'm also bleeding to death. Not quite as planned. Let me not spawn 25. Alright, so let's pretend that didn't happen, and we have these all sort of dead cops that are out there. Not too bad. They look really nice though, don't they? Of course, having them here inside my base was not really what I wanted. Okay, they're gone. So let's pretend that didn't happen, and let's make sure we have one. Let's get in and set target outside so I don't get them inside. Let's get a couple of cops here. Let's close it. zombies all out there. And the cops are below as well. And as long as we don't get the cops to aggro us, we are just fine. They're not gonna just blindly spit unless they see you. I mean, they're right underneath me right at the moment. So what happens if you get them to spit? One is over there. Let's get him over here. Here's another one. So because I'm up here over the bars, they can't really see me. If I go to some of these gaps here, there are some risks that they will see me and start spitting. And obviously we don't want to have that happen. Another thing you want to really take care of is that if you start shooting them, well, that one is dying. Let's see if I can get one into the blow up animation, like this one. Nope. So what risks happening is that you shoot a cop a little bit too much, but you don't kill him. And he will go into his explosion animation. And if he explodes next to a tree, that can mean serious problems for you. Oh, I just saw he died there. He was too far away from the tree to do anything, but I've had some testing where if he explodes next to the tree, he will bring down the tree and the whole tree house. So you really have to be careful about that. You don't want to be without a phone just because you had a cop explode right below you. Noisy, aren't they? So let's change the time a little bit here so we get away from them. Let's do a kill all. And we are daytime again. It's a lot easier when you're using your creative powers here. So with this, you should know how to make a standard treehouse base that should allow you to survive quite high up in the Blood Moon Horde count. I mean, definitely you could have this base up by day 7, and it will probably last up until, you know, day 500, 1,000, 2,000, as long as you keep hidden. Because it doesn't really matter how many radiated feral cops you have underneath you. If they can't see you, they're not going to start shooting at you, and they're just going to be milling around. But that pretty much goes for any base that you are sort of not abusing, but you are using some of the game mechanics against the zombies. But having just a basic treehouse base like this is pretty cool, and it doesn't require a lot of resources to make, and you can just chop down wood to get the resources. I personally like the idea of having built a treehouse to keep out of reach of zombies during a zombie apocalypse. And although it's workable partially as the zombies don't target trees, I think that's fine, and I wish there were more blocks that you could use to make it even cooler treehouse. And with that, we've delved into our teenage selves and built treehouses, and shown how effective it can be even against Blood Moon Hordes. I hope you've enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe, and tell me about your building experiences, especially with treehouses, and what cool designs you've made. See you next time.
Special thanks to the great patrons supporting the channel. If you would like to join the vetted community and support these videos, do follow the Patreon link below.